Welcome. In this introductory video I shall provide you with some facts and figures about the EU in order to make you somewhat more familiar with this special international organization. The German Constitutional Court, the Bundesverfassungsgericht, once termed the EU as an association of sovereign states. It all started back in the 50s with a community of 6 founding fathers, 6 member states, a community which was almost exclusively economically inspired. Over time, it gradually evolved into a European Union of currently 27 member states, which is active in almost every sector of daily life. These EU competences are governed by European institutions which are specifically set up for this purpose, as we will find out. In terms of size, the European Union covers a territory of over 4 million square kilometers. In comparison, the African Union has a surface of more than 30 million square kilometers. But the 4 million are comparable to the territory that covers the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian States. If the EU were a country, it would rank among the 10 biggest countries in the world. The biggest ones being Russia, China, the United States, Brazil and Canada, which are still 2 to 4 times larger than the European Union. By surface area, France, Spain and Sweden are the biggest EU countries. Together they take up more than 1/3 or more than 30% of the EU territory. By contrast, Cyprus, Luxembourg and Malta are the smallest member states of the European Union. By way of illustration, Luxembourg is more than 200 times smaller than France. The European Union currently has approximately 500 million inhabitants. This makes it, on a global scale, one of the world's largest populated areas. The largest ones being, of course, China and India, with over 1 billion inhabitants. In comparison, the African Union and the Asian communities, the Asian Association, have more inhabitants than the EU. The African Union with more than 750 million and the Asian with over 550 million. By contrast, the European Union has more inhabitants than Russia and the United States. Within the European Union, Germany is the largest country in terms of population, with approximately 82 million inhabitants, being followed by France and the UK with 65 and 62 million inhabitants respectively. These 3 countries, plus Italy and Spain, so the 5 largest countries in terms of population, cover in total more than 60% of the total European population. By contrast, the smallest member states in terms of population are again Cyprus, Luxembourg and Malta, not coincidentally probably also the 3 smallest member states in terms of size. Now, if we look at the overall picture within the EU, 1 out of 6 European citizens has the German nationality. For each Maltese in the EU, there are approximately 200 Germans. Europe's population is increasing through a combination of natural growth, actually meaning that more people are being born than die each year, combination of natural growth and net migration, meaning that more people settle into the EU than that they leave the EU. At the same time, this population is aging, though, as life expectancy increases and fewer children are being born. Finally, within the EU, many people actually live in large cities. Currently, the EU contains more than 15 cities of over 1 million inhabitants, the largest population centers being London, Paris, and Madrid. Living standards in the EU are generally high. According to recent estimates of the World Bank, the 27 member states of the European Union have an average GDP per capita amounting to some $33,000. Now, comparing this with some other big countries in the world, it is smaller, lower than the GDP per capita in the US, which amounts to some $48,000. It's comparable to the one in Japan, amounting to some $34,000. It is higher than the one in Russia, amounting to some $22,000, and it is several times higher than the one in Brazil, amounting to some 12,000 euros. At the same time, we cannot be blind to the fact that considerable differences exist within the 27 member states of the European Union. On the one end of the scale, we have Bulgaria and Romania being the poorest countries in terms of GDP per capita, amounting between $6,000 and $8,000. And on the other hand, at the other end of the scale, the Netherlands and Luxembourg being the richest countries in the EU, the Netherlands with a GDP per capita amounting to some $43,000, and especially Luxembourg with a GDP per capita amounting to some almost $90,000. The European Union had an agreed budget of 147.2 billion euro for the year 2012 and an aggregate budget of 64.3 billion for the period 2007-2013. These figures represent respectively 1.10% and 1.05% of the EU 27's gross national income. Now, these figures are at the same time a lot of money and not very much. It is a lot, especially when one compares to where the budget has come from. In 1960, the budget of the then European Economic Community amounted to merely 0.03% of GDP. By the same token, an individual country such as France had a budget of more than 800 billion euro in 1 year alone, for example in 2004. The European Union obtains its revenue not only from contributions from the 27 member countries, but also from import duties levied on goods coming from third countries and a percentage of the value-added tax levied by each country. Now, which are the most important budgetary items on the 2012 budget of 147 billion euros? Well, the single most important one being sustainable growth, which has taken up around 45.8% of the total budget. Second most important budgetary item being agriculture, with approximately 29.9% of the total. Interestingly, it is only since recent years that agriculture is no longer the most important item in the budget of the EU. In 1999, the euro was introduced as the Union's common currency. Currently, the Eurozone consists of 17 member states of the European Union. This means that at the moment 10 member states still do not use the euro as their official currency. Most of them, however, will be obliged to join the Eurozone and adopt the euro as their common currency once they fulfill the necessary criteria. The only countries that can remain outside the Eurozone are the UK, Denmark, and in practice also Sweden, the three countries that have negotiated an opt-out. The euro can in practice be considered as the most tangible example of cooperation between the European countries. The benefits of the single currency are immediately apparent to anyone traveling within the European Union or anyone shopping online on websites based in another Eurozone country. At the same time, it cannot be denied, however, that it is the euro precisely which has plunged the Union into the worst crisis of its existence. More explanations about this euro crisis, which is actually a government debt crisis, will be provided in the last week of this course. The European Union has no less than 23 official languages. Important documents, such as, for example, legislative acts, are being translated into every official language. Most or some institutions, however, only use a handful of languages as internal working languages. English is the most spoken language in the EU, with more than half of the European population using or speaking English as a native or a non-native speaker. German is the most widely spoken mother tongue within the EU. Now, as a final note, it becomes immediately apparent that this language issue constitutes a formidable challenge to the European Union to make this international cooperation into a success.